This wonderful clock is taken for granted by many people. Its 4 faces proudly scan across a large area of Stourport, including this tranquil basin. This reliable timepiece is also a landmark for visitors and residents. It dates back to 1813. In 1812, a few local businessmen decided it would be a good idea to have a town clock. In this period, timekeeping was very strict. There could be no excuses for the locals to be late. They approached as many businesses as they could and asked for subscriptions for its cost. It didn't take too long to get the required amount. The contributions were based in guineas. The famous Baldwin Foundry was amongst the subscribers. The building that was to house the clock was a warehouse. The warehouse was owned by the Severn Canal Carrying Company, and their headquarters was at the Tontine next door. Over the years, the Tontine became a hotel, and the clock warehouse became a sawmill, then Stourport Yacht Club. Both are now owned by British Waterways. The clock buildings have been of artistic interest for many years. The responsibility for maintaining the clock falls on the town council. But someone special does the job each week. Who is it?
I took over the maintenance and winding of the Stourport Town Clock in 1987. Previous to that, I served my apprenticeship with Vickers Armstrong's on the Tyne at Wallsend. My wife and I came down to Stourport in 1963. I was elected to the Town Council of Stourport in 1984 and eventually became mayor of the town in 1989-90. It was in 1987 that the Town Council required someone to carry on with the winding of the clock, which was previously done by Mr. Lane, the Boots the Chemist manager. He only did the winding, but I subsequently took on the position and the maintenance also of the clock. All my life I have had an interest in clocks and how they work, and enjoy nothing better than to strip an old grandfather clock down and bring it back to life. These are some of the clocks I'm currently working on in various stages of restoration. This clock I have just acquired for my collection. It is dating from about 1750 and is a Scottish grandfather clock. Stourports Town Clock was made by Samuel Thorpe of Aberley in 1812. It has some very innovative features on it, especially having a weight on each face to drive the 60-to-1 reduction gearbox necessary for the time, but also keeps the hands in position when the wind is blowing strong. Sam Thorpe was a prolific clockmaker, not only of turret clocks, of which he is famous, but grandfather clocks, mantel clocks, wall clocks, all built with innovative features. I know of 2 working grandfather clocks. One open to see for the public is the Fruiterer's Arms at Ombersley, in the bar there. Other turret clocks of Sam Thorpe are the one at St Peter and St Paul's Church, the old Norman church at Rock. This has a fine example of Sam Thorpe's work, built in 1805. Other turret clocks of Sam were at Whitley Court. That one is now on the floor, awaiting restoration by the National Heritage. The other one is at Glasshampton Abbey, which unfortunately at this moment is not working, but is still in position, which is a retreat for monks.
It's Sunday morning. The clock has to be wound up and all working parts checked.
The first job on a Sunday morning usually is to wind up the weight which does the striking of the clock. There's a big weight down here, I estimate to be 250 to 300 weight. Too heavy to wind directly. So we have to put on a reduction gear, which is 4.5 to 1 reductions. Every 4.5 winds of this handle turns this barrel once. After completing the winding of the strike mechanism, we then take our attention to the barrel which drives the clock with the weight on, which is direct wind. The mechanism in Stourport clock is accurate even this day and age to 1 minute per week. It is a wonderful piece of machinery, and I have great delight in maintaining it. Any wear in the clock mechanism, parts or otherwise, I make myself in my workshop at home. Each one of these weights was the innovative part of this clock, because on each face is a gearbox with a 60 to 1 reduction, which normally would be driven by this here to drive them. In this case, because of wind interference with the hands, Sam Thorpe introduced a barrel on each gearbox with a weight on which holds the hands very steady against the wind, and also reduces the weight necessary on this barrel by using the weight. This actually drives back down and drives the clock as well as this weight. It's an innovative thing with a weight on each dial, not often seen in other turret clocks. In the Millennium Awards, we were given a plaque by Rotary Watches for our efforts in keeping this special clock in good working condition. The roof of this building is quite unique in its construction as regards the tiles. If you notice, they're graduated, they're quite large at the bottom and get smaller and smaller as you go towards the apex to spread the load on the roof trusses. When the scaffolding went up for repairs and recent painting, I took a chance to see a close-up of the clock face.
The weather vane and globe blew off in a recent storm. The arrows were recovered from the roof, but the vane was lost in the basin. A replica has now been made. It is over 6 feet long, but its size is deceptive when it's viewed from a distance. From its lofty position, the clock has witnessed many changes and events over its 190-odd years. Let's see a few. In 1870, it saw the building of the current bridge. This was the bandstand in 1906. Visitors have always loved Stourport. Even the bikers. The clock has also witnessed the cruelest weather over the years. In the late 1800s, there were 6 periods of deep cold and the river froze over. Locals and visitors congregated and even walked across. In the 1920s and 1940s, the river area was badly flooded. In the year 2000, the floods were in colour. The clock also overlooked this disaster. People came from near and far to see the extent of the damage. The clock has seen celebrations, like the Silver Jubilee held in Worcester Street, the march through the town on Armistice Day, the Carnival in full swing in 1925, and again in 1956. The clock played an important part in earlier years for workers' timekeeping. They would either hear the clock chime or pass the clock on their way to workplaces, like the tannery in 1920 or the carpet firm Bondworth in 1933. The power station, which closed in 1984, or even the vinegar factory, which closed in 1999. These are just a few of the events over the years. The clock will see many more. The next time you hear the clock chime, think about Stourport's history and the man who looks after the clock, Dave Little.
Well, that's it for another week.